You're watching the Big Picture Business Program Benchmark. We now bring you the second and concluding part of our exclusive interview with the former UN Under-Secretary General for Disarmament Affairs, Jayantha Dhanapala. In this first segment, we continue our discussion about the private sector's attitude towards corruption, the cost of corruption to the country, and the issues taken up by the Friday Forum. But Mr. Dhanapala, is the private sector strong enough to take a stand?
If some of the captains of industry, these people who are voted by the Lanka Monthly Digest as being the most respected in business, and others who are from time to time awarded various prizes for good business ethics, if these people come out openly and say, we want to have a clean business sector, and we ask that any tender being offered for a major construction effort should be done in such a way that we can accept these conditions in the interest of the country and in the interest of the taxpayer. If that is done and the others respond, then we will know that there is unity. If people don't respond, we know who the culprits are.
How large is the cost of corruption to this country at the end of the day?
That's very difficult to estimate. I think you have to ask an economist that, because it's very difficult to quantify this. But there are estimates of it, and I don't have the figures at the tips of my fingers, but it is quite significant. And it is particularly significant for a developing country like ours, who, as I said before, can ill afford to have even 1% of GDP as corruption, because we are losing so much money, the people's money.
The Friday Forum, of which you are a member, which calls itself a group of concerned citizens, has repeatedly called on both the government and indeed the opposition to take action to stop corruption and address good governance on numerous fronts. How much progress have you made?
We are a group of very conscientious and concerned citizens who are no less patriotic than any other person who is either in political office or in the public sector or private sector. And we have raised issues. Of course, you can't raise concerns on every issue, and given our limitations, we meet once a month and discuss particular issues, and we've raised this. What impact does it make? Well, it's very difficult to say, but what impact, for example, does a letter to the editor make in an English newspaper, a Sinhala newspaper, or a Tamil newspaper? We are ventilating what we think are common views amongst the public of Sri Lanka. And we do it on the basis of certain principles and values that we share. We hope that it reaches the government. We have addressed the President, we've addressed the Secretary to the President, we've addressed ministers, we've met some of these people ourselves, and of course we use the media. We are not trying to embarrass the government. We cannot really say we have made a difference. I think that would be very pompous of us to claim that. But we hope it has even a small impact, that it touches the conscience of the people who read it, that with regard to the general public, that it awakens in them a different opinion on certain issues. I think, for example, our reaction to the panel of experts report of the Secretary General was very different from what the others said. We didn't praise it, we didn't condemn it, but we pointed to particular aspects of it that needed consideration. And in that way, we hope we make an impact.
A few months back, the Friday Forum wrote to the leader of the opposition about its role and responsibilities. In it you say that on the subject of personnel facilities or perks for MPs, quote, there seems to be cohabitation, unquote, presumably on the part of the opposition. Mr. Dhanapala, did the leader of the opposition reply or respond to your letter?
No, we had a deafening silence. At one stage, we were not sure whether it had been received by him, but we've checked with his private secretary and we know that the letter was received. So clearly a conscious decision was taken not to respond to us, and thereby hangs a tale. I'm sorry about that, because I think it would have been useful if at least there was an acknowledgement that as a citizens group what we had said would be acknowledged and would be taken into account, so that we have no hope, even if the opposition is behaving in the same way as the government, that we are going to have a different situation even if there is a change of government in the future. And this is very worrisome, because it means the standards of our political parties has dropped. They only are concerned with selfish gains for themselves, a car, a permit, or housing for themselves, a new building or a new office for themselves, and that is about all that matters. What about the people, the needs of the people? What about democracy? And what about the glorious ideas of democracy that have got to be preserved and respected? Unfortunately, that seems to take second place with regard to the current set of parliamentarians we have, and that is deeply disappointing. I am not going to tar everybody with the same brush. I have no doubt that there are some very able members of parliament and very selfless people who are very dedicated to the same ideas. But when somebody like the leader of the opposition does not respond to the letter of a concerned group of citizens which raised very valid points, then I think it is a failure on his part of his democratic responsibilities.
After the break, Jayanta Dhanapala talks about the role of the opposition, the social effects of corruption and the death fast in India a few months ago. Don't go away. Thanks for staying with us. We now return to our exclusive interview with Jayanta Dhanapala. I do believe the letter cited the issues of car permits, pensions for MPs, and also about MPs' allocations to have their children sent to select schools. Does the opposition in this country actually play the defined role it is supposed to play in contributing to the national agenda?
It does not, and that is precisely our point. One might say that it is not allowed to. That's another arguable point, because certainly the way in which some of the government members of parliament heckle opposition MPs, do not allow them an opportunity of speaking, all that of course is to be condemned, because I think everybody should have the right to speak his or her mind in parliament, particularly since they are representatives of the people. But be that as it may, I think still there is a lot of room for the opposition to play a more active role in terms of what was conceived as the alternative government, and that is not being done.
The newly appointed chairman of the Bribery Commission has confirmed that there are nearly 50 corruption inquiries, these are his words, about public servants, including many that revolve around accumulation of wealth by politicians and public servants, or the so-called asset test. But Mr. Dhanapala, despite the open display of or the misuse of wealth by politicians and some public servants, we have yet to witness anyone in any hierarchy, in any administration, being taken to task.
We don't have the credibility that this is being done, and that is what is so unfortunate, that the public must feel that if they go to the police and say there is such and such a person who's asking me for a bribe, that the police will go after that person and not harass the complainant. Now, if that credibility can be established over a period of time, and this is where the media have to play a role, because the media can do something about it, can perhaps accompany the complainant to the police, make sure that the complainant is in fact protected. We must have witness protection laws. We must have whistleblower laws, so that if somebody knows of corruption taking place in the government, that person can blow the whistle and be sure that he or she is not going to be penalized. I think the press must rise to it. Whether the state press does it, I don't know, but at least the private press must do it, because for too long our private press have also behaved like a kept press. They have been self-censored and they have not performed their task in a democratic community just as much as we allege the opposition is not performing its task.
So is the work of the Bribery Commission in this current context a waste of time?
No, it's not. I don't think anybody's role in our democratic society is a waste of time. We have to persist with these institutions. If the institutions are not working at a particular time, then we must ensure that they do work. And it is pressure of public opinion that can help to change a defunct bribery commission into something that is vibrant and functioning.
Mr. Dhanapal, in April in India, there was a death fast by a nearly 80-year-old activist and a Mahatma Gandhi devotee, and this lasted 4 days. And this was to support, or it had the support of the common people, and caused the Indian government to accede to his demands, which was simply that members of civil society should sit on a committee that would draft a bill to strengthen anti-corruption laws. There was a special focus here on prosecuting corrupt ministers and public officials. Can you put this into perspective, perhaps in the context of what is happening here in Sri Lanka?
Well, we are not yet at that stage, clearly, because of the fact that we have a very authoritarian government right now, and even the wish of the opposition to have a right for information bill unfortunately withered on the vine. And although many eloquent editorials were written by the media about the need for this, nothing has happened. Now, I'm not sure that a fast unto death is going to help to create it, and I don't advocate anybody fasting unto death. I myself would be the last person to do that. I think I like my food too much. But quite apart from that, I think you will need to have a much more mature society for us to be able to conduct a civil society protest to influence the government to go ahead with having the pieces of legislation that we would like to see.
Do we as a nation actually realize the toll that corruption takes on each and every one of us?
Every country has a point of no return. I don't think you can prescribe for Sri Lankans the point which the Egyptians reached when they went on to Tahrir Square and demonstrated, or where that man in Tunis was so driven to desperation that he self-immolated in order to bring a point home, and that electrified his fellow citizens into what they did in Tunisia. Each country has to take its own path, and I think if the level of corruption in Sri Lanka and the level of authoritarianism continues very much further, there will be a time when our people will say enough is enough. And we don't know when that time will be. I hope we don't resort to outside extra parliamentary means. I believe very strongly in democratic procedures, and I think democratic procedures have changed governments in the past. But we have, in the case of the JVP of 1971, 88, 89, and more recently the LTTE, we have rejected that form of social change and economic changes. So we need to have a way in which we can channel the protests and the disappointment of the people in a democratic manner to achieve change.
The Voice of Business is up next. With biz confidence improving and inflation on its way down, what are the investment prospects for Sri Lanka? Stay tuned and find out.